Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining me. This is James Lillie for Data Visualization 625 in spring of 2025 for Professor Christopher Wrightson in the UMGC Masters Data Analytics program. Today we will be looking at the National Center for Healthcare Statistics disease prevalence in the United States from 1950 to 2019, by decade, and we will specifically be looking at measles, mumps, rubella, and pertussis. And so what this data set is just a conglomerate of these diseases, many more diseases. We are specifically looking at 4, but it is a table of all of these diseases by decade and the number of cases per decade of these diseases. And so what we have in front of us here is a simple bar chart, bar graph, and we have measles, mumps, rubella, and pertussis whooping cough. We have annotations on each of them. So for the first 3, we have when the vaccine was introduced for that specific disease, and then on the right for pertussis, we actually have a decrease in the production of pertussis vaccinations in the United States due to a scare in the 1970s and 80s of a side effect of the pertussis vaccine causing encephalopathy, which is swelling of the brain. And so as we can see here, obviously, there is a prevalence in society of these cases, of these diseases, and then as soon as the vaccine is introduced, a sharp decline. We can see the trend lines for the first 3 graphs disappear around the same time, actually, in 2005, roughly. And then over here for pertussis, it actually stays because we have that increase in the number of cases. So it's very clear in figure 1 here that as vaccines are introduced, the prevalence of these diseases almost disappears in society. The next chart for figure 2 that we have is a simple polygon chart looking, again, same thing, disease over time by decade, total number of cases per decade, looking at the decline over time. And so what we have is we can see, again, a large, rapid decline in the number of cases when the vaccines were introduced. We can also see over here, even with the scare and the reduction in the supply of the vaccines for pertussis, it was reduced to 1 supplier in 1985 in the United States, we can still see this sharp decrease in the prevalence of the disease due to the vaccine's effectiveness. We can see down here, there's a slight increase, but as I said, over time, large decrease. Now we have total number of cases, line graph, looking by every 2-year period from 1990 to 2024 with our predictions and our estimate here for the confidence intervals. We can see that measles predicts very low cases due to the vaccines. Again, mumps, a slight increase that we had, and then it again predicts a relatively low prevalence in society. It does, unfortunately, predict some cases, but we can see a very large estimates here. So very large estimates. For rubella, we can see large decrease. They think it will be a very low number of cases. Again, pretty small, moderate estimates here, but, obviously the vaccines are working. We can see here our increase. We had the scare in the 1970s and 80s. Reduction to 1 supplier of the pertussis vaccine in the United States, we see a large increase in the number of cases. We can see the average here with the confidence intervals over here. We can see that they predict a slight increase and then a decrease over time with very large confidence intervals, which I find interesting. But again, obviously, as we see, they predict a decrease in the number of cases due to the vaccine. Here we have the trend lines, same graph along with trend lines, along with the estimate and the confidence intervals and the forecast confidence intervals of the estimates. And then we can see we have, even with the slight increase predicted, they predict a very sharp decline trend due to the vaccines. Again, it's very obvious here. You can see we have the average and the predicted trend. We can see all going down due to the vaccines. Last, we have an area chart. Same thing, looking at prevalence in cases from 1990 to 2024 by every 2 years. We can see we have the increase for the pertussis, the decrease for everything else due to the vaccinations. We can see they also predict the forecast to be very, very small due to the vaccinations. So ultimately, yes, vaccines do work. Thank you for listening.